Hello, and welcome to Grade.com Talks With. Today we're talking with John Pendergrass, Vice President of Programs and Publications at Environmental Law Institute, an organization that is fostering innovative, just, and practical law and policy solutions to enable leaders across borders and sectors to make environmental, economic, and social progress. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we're going to learn about an organization that is making law work for people, places, and the planet. Good morning, John. Welcome to Grade.com Talks With. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm excited to join you.
Wonderful. How would you describe Environmental Law Institute for people who are not familiar with your work?
So ELI, the short name we used for the Environmental Law Institute, was formed in 1969 at the dawn of environmental law. And we are a research, education, and publishing organization devoted to, as you mentioned, making law work for people, places, and the planet. So we are trying to improve the environment and sustainable development so that people are able to improve their lives and livelihood in relationship to the environment. And so sustainable development is one of our main goals.
Mm-hmm. I really like your commitment to sustainable development. It's very essential in today's day and age. For people who are not familiar with environmental law, could you please briefly describe what is environmental law and what issues it is addressing and solving?
Thank you. It's actually a very broad term, the way we at ELI look at it. Environmental law covers everything from international treaties, such as the Treaty for Climate Change, the Paris Agreement that some people may have heard of. So these are international agreements between nations to try and solve some of our environmental problems, from climate change to the depletion of the ozone layer, which is covered by the Montreal Protocol, to disposal of transportation and disposal of hazardous chemicals across international borders. But it's also primarily the law of nations to try and deal with environmental issues. And some of those are pollution, air pollution control, where we have smog in cities like Los Angeles in the United States, or Beijing, or Almaty in Kazakhstan, to water issues. We've had severe issues in the United States recently with lead in drinking water in some cities. And environmental law sets the rules for reducing the amounts of contaminants in drinking water. It also controls water pollution from, say, sewage treatment plants or industrial plants that are discharging contamination to the water. Environmental law sets standards. But it also deals with things like biodiversity, setting rules to assure that we maintain the biodiversity that we have around the world. Some of it is what we refer to as charismatic megafauna, the lions and tigers and all of the species that we all will love to continue to see in the wild, but also to the small fish in the rivers that sustain the larger fish, sturgeon or trout or others. So the whole ecosystem. Environmental law is trying to deal with maintaining healthy ecosystems as well as the pollution control problems.
As you mentioned, it covers quite a wide range of issues, including industrial issues as well as air pollution and sustaining the biodiversity of our ecosystem. So it's quite a range, and there must be a lot of people and a lot of policymakers working on it, as well as on the side of people taking action towards following those policies and laws. You mentioned several key issues. However, would you mind highlighting three top key issues that is environmental law is addressing and highlighting at this day?
Well, I think the most important issue right now and has been for a few decades is climate change. The emissions of greenhouse gas contaminants, carbon dioxide, methane, and other things that come from human activities are changing our climate. We are increasing the overall global temperature of the globe, which is leading to a variety of changes in our climate, from increased rainfall in some places to drought in other places to heat waves in some places. But it also causes more extreme cold weather because of the way that, say, the jet stream is affected. So climate change is probably the most important. And environmental law is dealing with both trying to set standards for reducing the emissions of greenhouse gases. So reducing the carbon dioxide that we are emitting, making more efficient cars and buildings, to changing our ways of having transportation so we don't rely on cars as much, becoming more energy efficient. But also, environmental law deals with adaptation to climate change. So there are a number of things that we need to do to build our resilience to dealing with the effects of sea level rise, which is caused by the warming environment, to these increased storms and floods and things. So we have to change sometimes where we are putting certain facilities or where people are living, to also just changing the way we think about how do we govern that. One of the other issues that's going to come up with climate change has already started to some degree, and environmental law is part of dealing with the migration of people, because we have in low-lying countries or areas in the United States, it may be in South Florida, in Bangladesh, much of the country is very low-lying, and sea level rise is going to eliminate the areas where some people live. So they are going to need to move. And ELI is working on a concept introduced by people from the Pacific Islands that are very low-lying island states, on migration with dignity, allowing people who are going to be forced to move to migrate with dignity, with the rights, human rights, to have jobs, to be able to have their welfare, and to do it in a way that they get to choose rather than being forced away. Another issue that we are very much working on is rights to water. So water is fundamental to human life, and yet many people, possibly, certainly more than 1 billion people around the world, do not have access to clean water for drinking, for household use. And though they may have access and rights to the land that they farm or graze, they may not have rights to the water. So we are working with other organizations on researching and then trying to provide a foundation for what are the rights that people should have to access to water.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, climate change is the urgent call, is the most urgent issue that needs to be addressed, that needs to be taken care of. And you mentioned several effects of it, migration and the clean water. The fact that your organization is working on highlighting and addressing those two issues are very important. Could you please define how does your organization support policymakers, or the scope of your work, so we can understand the impact that you are doing in the issues to regards of climate change as well as others related to environmental law?
Good point. So the ELI is a non-governmental organization. And so we work to assist others to achieve their goals. And so we work with governments when they are asking for assistance in drafting new laws or policies or helping them build the capacity of their institutions. We're doing this in the United States with the national government and states. But about half of our work is with other countries, primarily developing countries, but we have worked in Europe and other developed countries. But so we work with them. They may ask us for assistance in drafting legislation. We did that in Liberia, drafting legislation for the sustainable development of Liberia's forests, which also then included the rights of communities that lived in the forest to manage their own forest area. So we worked with them. Then we worked with the communities to educate them about what their rights were under this new law, how to make best use of those, how to negotiate with timber companies that might be coming to log certain parts of that. We also worked with the national government agency to educate them on good enforcement techniques. Another thing that we have been doing, we pioneered educating judges around the world about environmental law. So most judges are general. They know about law, but environmental law is, as we discussed, a fairly specialized topic. So we have been educating judges since the past more than 30 years about environmental law, but also about the science. So climate change is an issue where the science is actually very well understood by scientists, but not necessarily by lay people. So we've been educating judges about not only the environmental law, but about the science related to climate change and to other issues. So we work with governments, with the governmental agencies and staff, but also with the communities and other non-governmental organizations. In China, we are working to educate non-governmental organizations, staff, on how to bring litigation, environmental public interest litigation, how to bring cases to improve the environment, how to comply with environmental law.
Mm-hmm. I really like the fact that although you're working in developed countries, but you're primarily focused on developing nations, and the fact that you are sharing the role models of achievements of the developed nations that have done that can be implemented in the developing and underdeveloped nations is great, because sharing knowledge, sharing experiences can save time and can provide a roadmap for better addressing the issues and tackling them. How do you see the landscape of environmental law in regards of climate change changing in the next 5 to 15 years?
On the point that you were making, we do think it's very important to work with the developing countries, and we do bring experience that we've learned about from Europe, from the United States, from Australia, from other countries. But we also bring the experience of other southern, countries of the South. So we are working currently in Colombia, and we have brought some experts from Sweden. We've also brought experts from Brazil. So we think it's important to bring experience, and Brazil has some excellent lessons for people to learn from. So it's not just from the developed countries to the developing, but developing and developing. To your question about how I see things developing on climate change law, it was certainly encouraged by the Biden administration in the U.S. Rejoining the Paris Agreement. I have some hopes that the Paris Agreement will be implemented by most of the countries, and almost all the countries in the world are parties to that. But it's essential for them to be reducing their emissions. I think that there is a good possibility that they will do that, that the law will facilitate the transformation of our energy systems and our transportation systems to ways that do not rely on fossil fuels, which are a major contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. But one of the other things that's going to be important in that is an emphasis on the rule of law in the environmental field. And so that's something that ELI focuses on a lot, which is assuring that we have rules for climate change that will actually accomplish the purpose that we want, so that the standards are such that we'll have sufficient reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to prevent a 2-degree warming, but also that governments, the leaders of governments, industry, and the people comply with those rules. So that environmental rule of law means that everyone is subject to the law and complies with the law. It means an absence of corruption, and that's something that we are working hard on, and we think that that's going to be something that will improve over the next few years, that will contribute to the improvement of the law related to climate change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing your outlook for the changes coming in the environmental law landscape. I really like the fact that you highlighted the rule of law, and everyone, the rules of law will be in place, and everyone will follow those laws, rules, and policies. If someone would like to support Environmental Law Institute, how can they do that?
So our website is www.eli.org. And we have a section right on the homepage that's called Get Involved. And that is where you can be in touch with us to volunteer services with us, but also to donate to the Environmental Law Institute. We are a charity, and donations are actually a very important part of how we do our work. So we do rely very heavily on donations from individuals, but we also really like to have the volunteers of people who have expertise in some of these fields. We talked about the water issues, or what we refer to as environmental peace building, and the migration issues. We have significant people that are helping us out with those. So www.eli.org, get involved, and that would be great.
Wonderful. The link to eli.org involve will be provided in the link in the description of this podcast. Thank you so much, John. It was wonderful to talk to you and learn about the great work that you're doing with Environmental Law Institute.
Thank you, Kareem.
Yeah, for you, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button, because this will show the YouTube algorithm and the podcast algorithm that this conversation is important, and we need more policies and laws around environmental issues, and we as people need to follow them and take action towards a better future. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode.